It's an unusual area of expertise, but Dr. Laura Vidal has dedicated her career to preventing forced marriage. A lecturer and researcher at the University of Canberra, she spent more than a decade talking to victims about their experiences.
I think the thing to take into account is that a forced marriage isn't a single moment in time. It's not something that just happens. It occurs across somebody's life in terms of what is socialised as marriage practices, what is going to be expected of people when marriage comes, and the way in which, I guess, gender roles and other kinds of identities within families are established. It's a whole lifetime of process towards the point of a forced marriage.
Of the 500 odd complaints that the AFP's received about forced marriage, why haven't they been able to take it any further?
In my experience, and I can only speak from the people that I've worked with and the research that I've done, the primary challenge is that it is often young women who are navigating the prospect of marriage in their life, as well as the complexity of their family relationships. And the most common thing that is said to me is, I don't want anybody to get in trouble, I just don't want to get married. And so the biggest barrier is that the young women themselves are faced with this impossible choice that in order for that to not happen, they need to report what's happening to them to the police, and they don't want to do that.
Is the system broken?
I'd say the system is incomplete because criminal justice pathways are one option, and up until very recently in Australia, that has been the only option that has been available to people in these situations, that if they want support, the only way they can get referred onto that support program is through the Australian Federal Police. And so when they don't want to do that, there's a big void in terms of what next and how do they get supported and how do we actually work with them and potentially their families to prevent that behaviour or to prevent that marriage from progressing.
But we're talking about young, vulnerable women here who don't have a safety net. I mean, that's quite staggering.
It is.
How can we allow this to happen?
Why do we allow this to happen is because we have narrowed our field of view to viewing this as a criminal justice issue. We've created a victim-perpetrator binary between young women and their families, and we can't see outside of that. Whereas what the young women are telling us is, we don't want that. We need to dismantle the victim-perpetrator binary in this instance, and we need to be able to have an option that helps me talk to my family, that provides me that support, that builds the safety net. Forced marriages don't just happen by one person, and we have to think really critically about what it means for this conviction to be considered a success in the realm of preventing or addressing forced marriage. And in the work that I have done, mothers are often under also impossible pressure to facilitate marriages. It's often how they were married and every other woman that's come before them, and the pressure that comes from community and families. And in this instance, there was a matchmaker and there was 500 people in attendance at a wedding, and I can't help but suggest that the conviction of Ruqia's mother is almost like a scapegoat in this instance, because it doesn't happen alone. It doesn't happen by one person. And what were the influencing factors for her that led to that? And I think, again, drawing on the many stories of the women that I've worked with over the years who were able to identify that their mothers were also victims of a forced marriage and were essentially then criminalising people who have also been victimised. And we need to think really carefully about that. We need to think carefully about what that means and whether or not it is actually seeking to achieve the outcome that we want. But it's about acknowledging the reality, and if our end game is, or if our measure of success is, preventing marriages and keeping people safe, the mechanism that we need to invest in is a mechanism that does that. And what we have seen is that the criminal justice mechanism up until this point has not been able to achieve that.